I am an artist, and it took me a lot of years to figure out that I am an artist. I was not somebody who was born with a pencil in their hand or had someone going, oh, look at you, you can do this or that. It took me years to kind of come to the realization that I've got creativity inside of me, and it's through art that I can let it out. And what I have discovered as I've gone through kind of different stages is that we all have creativity, right? We all have an imagination, we all have creativity, we just don't always use those things. And we can use them in so many different avenues of our life. And I've just been lucky enough that I've been able to do it in visual arts. And so I think the very first art class I was in high school, and both my sisters could draw. I'm the youngest of 7, and I was always like, oh, I wish I could draw like they could, and I can't. They can just do it off the top of their head. And so I finally get to take an art class in my freshman year in high school. I was very excited, and the first thing she says is, let's draw. And I was like, oh man. And so we had to draw our neighbor's shoe, which I thought was weird, but I was like, all right. So and she didn't say what to do, she's just like, draw. And I'm like, okay. So I just do what I do, which was nothing, because I just didn't know what I was doing. And she walks by and she does this, and shakes her head and kind of rolls her eyes. And I'm like, okay, this isn't the class for me. I was like, I'm not artistic, I can't do this. And I'm pretty sure I dropped the class because I have absolutely no memory of doing anything else in that art class. So I'm pretty sure I went over to home ec and learned how to boil an egg along the way. So anyway, art kind of out of my life. You make it through college. Sculpture had always interested me. Don't ask me why. I mean, even from kindergarten, I did a little yellow, it was actually a big yellow snake. Loved that snake. It was just ceramic, bright yellow, but it was always something that I was proud of. But that was like it as far as my sculpture experience in life, right? But it always appealed to me. So when I went to Trinity University, and I took a sculpture class. Those were my 2, I only had time to do 2 extracurricular, and I took both sculpture. And Phil Levitt was the instructor, fabulous artist, fabulous man. And he had been a stonemason in England and did a fabulous job of teaching me how to stone carve. And it turned out I have this innate ability for stone carving. Well, who knew, right? I mean, it wasn't me. And it was just that I got introduced to it, I had the opportunity, and I loved it. So the way he taught was just by looking at, you find, say, the cracks to begin with, the things that are wrong with the stone. You listen to the stone. You tap it with a hammer. You see if there's any flaws in it that are going to cause you problems along the way. And then off you go, and you take away the crack that you see, and then you find something, fissure here, and you take that away. And your goal is to make it the strongest piece so that it all stays together when you're finished. And then while you're going, you just start seeing the lines and the movement and so forth. So, love it. Worked with him for a couple years after college. And he said to me, at the time I was doing busts. I did a bust of my father. I was doing some clay work. And he said, Susan, you can make a living at this. And I said, at what? And he goes, what you're doing right here. He said, making busts. People pay money for this, doing art. And I said, I just couldn't see it. I couldn't imagine it. And he's like, but you could. I said, all right. So, but that just wasn't my background, right? I didn't have anything behind me that said, yeah, great idea. Let's dive into that. So I just kept going, and I love the stone carving, but after a while I get married and I have kids, and let's fast forward 20 years, and I'm thinking, what do I really love to do in life? It's art. It's the thing that brings me joy when I'm doing it, and it kind of helps me center onto myself, discover who I am. So I went back to school, and I got an art degree because I was like, I got to have more than just my love of stone carving. So I did. I went to Texas State when I was 40, drove back and forth for 4 years. And there I learned to weld. And welding, like the stone carving. So with my stone carving, I work very organically, right, because of the way I learned. So everything's kind of abstract. If you say, Susan, let's make a swan, I'm going to go, I don't think so. I might make something that looks like a swan, but that will be by accident. So when I started the welding, it was the same thing in that I found something that is hard, and with the metal it doesn't really speak to you per se like the stone does, but you can make it into something that is flowing and moving. And so I learned to do practical things like gates, and I did things that were site specific, like in a park. I did a life-size hammock that was up in the trees and had to do with not being able to attain your dreams because it was above your head, but at one level it looked like you could walk to it and get in it, but you never could. So it was kind of an optical illusion, but I loved it because my mom was around at the time, and she came and she said, Susan, why, because it was blue and yellow, I painted it real bright colors. She said, why did you take a hammock and paint it? I said, Mom, it's metal, it's steel. She's like, what? I said, yeah. So it was realistic looking. It was a very realistic hammock. But stuff like that intrigues me when you get people that you get that feedback from people, and it's like, all right, something's happening here. So I enjoyed that, and then I decided to go ahead and continue on with my artwork, but I still wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't thinking of myself, and I think one of the things that I've discovered in life is I've always put other people ahead of me, which for some things is wonderful, but if you do it all the time, it's pretty hard. It's hard on yourself, right? Great for other people, but harder on yourself. So I'm finally kind of shifting gears as I get wiser in life, but I did, let's say, so if you shift now to 20 years later, I am focusing on my artwork and doing what I want to do. But even back then, or in the time in between, I had an art center. I did an nonprofit art education center. And that was wonderful, and was able to have art lessons for adults and children, and worked with schools and worked with other nonprofit agencies and hospitals and so forth, all with the goal of providing opportunities for people not only to learn about visual arts and the art education, but to have the opportunity to use their creativity and maybe discover their creativity, because it's your creativity or your passion might be singing, or it might be dancing, or it might be poetry, or so many things. It might be leadership. It might be being a great leader. But if you never have the opportunity, you'll never discover it, right? So that was one of the reasons I wanted to do the art center, and I did that for 12 years and loved it, but rarely had time to do anything of my own artwork. And so finally, in 2017, I said, I'm done. I'm going to try and focus on myself and do my own artwork and see what happens. So I've been spending more of the last few years in my shop out in Gray Forest, and I do have fun putting together fibers with metal and stone with metal or whatever. And I was thinking about it. I don't know, my mom loved to sew, and I was always around fibers. And when I took a fiber class in college, loved it. It's like, I could be a fiber artist. And I was like, no, focus on your sculpture. But one of the things I did back then, I don't know how many of y'all know what a crazy quilt is. It's a quilt, so most quilts have a pattern to them. There'll be a star pattern or a log cabin or strips or squares. They're very geometrical, right? A crazy quilt is just when people had leftover scraps of material, they would just start putting them together in different it wasn't a pattern, they just started sewing them together. And they would use different stitches, and they'd make it until it made like the size of a bed. So that would be their quilt. But it had no pattern to it per se. It was just kind of a free-for-all of material and textures and colors. So they're beautiful. I think they're beautiful, at least. Because it's celebrating, to me, it's celebrating, what's the word? The celebrating this little strip of material, and the person has the vision on how to put this together, and it takes an enormous amount of time. And they come out with this beautiful thing. And so I've always admired crazy quilts. I don't have the patience to do it. I've never made one normally. But when I was in college for my art degree, I pulled together some ladies, and we were doing a project for a recycling center. And we had a 30-foot piece of steel. It was this what they used to block off their entrance. And it was 10 feet tall and 30 feet wide. And I said, what if we did a crazy quilt on this piece of steel? I said, I'll weld the sections. And I made 16 sections. And then we each got 4 areas. And then we could decorate it however we wanted, right? And that made this giant piece.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I do not have a picture of it. It kills me to this day because it was before we had phones and all of that, right? You would have had to take your camera out there. Anyway, now, if you're coming in my world now, I'm still working with crazy quilts. And now what I do is I will find a crazy quilt in a garage sale or wherever. And I take it, and one of the things, and it's true about a lot of things in life, you see it and you realize somebody took the time out of their day and with their talents and their hands, and they put this together. And it may not be worth $1 million, but it is a beautiful object. And it is to me, it's to be celebrated because it's just, I don't know, it's something that reflects that individual, right? It's what's inside of them there. So I take the crazy quilt and I cut it up, and I kind of frame it within a metal frame that hopefully highlights the piece and highlights the talent of this person who we do not know, but you're able to hopefully appreciate it and love it for what it is. And so that's kind of what I'm doing with a lot of my artwork right now, and it has allowed me to, it has inspired me to do, I'm doing a metal weaving. I love to take stuff that's sitting on the ground and see what I can create out of it. Same thing, like if someone says, make me a swan, it's like, let me just see what I can create with what I got. And that to me is the joy of expressing my creativity, I'm gonna say, because it's just seeing what comes out of it. And sometimes I love it and sometimes I don't. And sometimes other people love it and sometimes they don't. But you do it, from my perspective, the reason that I do my art is because I get such joy in using creativity in my life. And if it was some other format for me, I guess that's what I'd be doing instead of being an artist. But I would say, for me, I would say never give up on trying to figure out where your passion is and where your creativity lies, because it's not always so obvious, right? And people will knock you down and they will say, no, you can't do that. That's not you. But you'll find it. And what I wanted to, before, I know my time is probably, right, up? Well, one of the things, it was funny, doing this talk, it made me go back and look at my website, which I don't do all that often. But I was like, I kind of like what I wrote there. And I had forgotten what I had written there. So I will leave you with this. It says, art and creativity belong to everyone. It is finding what speaks to each individual, the thing that throws open their window to their imagination and passion, which one can never give up on. Creativity can lay dormant during times of stress and strife, but it can soothe, heal, and nurture when allowed to appear. Always permit yourself to languish in your creativity whenever possible. encourage others to create with their talents, or help teach people to tap into their passion.
Beautiful. Very
Good.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
question. Let's say you do a piece that you absolutely love,
Uh-huh.
and then nobody likes it. How do you process?
I guess I look at it in that either I have to be, part of me is, you have to enjoy the process, right, what you're doing. So when I'm doing a piece of artwork, I'm not doing it so that you're going to say, wow, that's a great piece of art. And so I know when I start that that's a possibility, that someone's not going to like this. And in fact, I know people aren't going to like this. But there will be someone who does. And as long as I think it's the best work, because that's for me, I always try and do the best, right, that I can do. I'll never put something out there that I think isn't one of my best options. Yeah, it doesn't feel great, but it's just a part of it. And you have to try and not take it real personally, because that's the tough, I've noticed with a lot of artists, because I worked with so many over at the Art Center, that either you have someone who can let it roll off their shoulders when someone just kind of gives them grief about it, or it just knocks them on the floor. Because I think every artist feels like that's their soul, man. That's their heart and soul in that piece. And when someone says, I don't like it, it can be devastating. So you really have to approach it with the practical side as well as your passionate side, that just says it's okay if someone doesn't like what I'm doing.
When you were leading the art school and somebody got knocked on the floor, they took it too personally.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any particular ways you found to help them get back up and re-engage?
Usually, I guess we'd be talking, and we'd talk about how that's just one person's perspective, and that I realize that what they're doing, they take to heart, and that what they did was wonderful. But just what I said, it's just like the whole world's not going to see it that way. So try not to be, and I don't want to say try not to be sensitive, because everyone is sensitive to different things, but it's like keep going with what you're doing, because you're going to find someone who thinks it's a pretty wonderful thing. And I would have artists or people, let's say, who had dementia, and they would come back and take a class. Their son would come with them to take a class. And that was one of the things they could remember, was how to do art. And it was the joy they found in doing it, right, that they could connect with. And I think that's what also, when I'm working with the instructors, it's like, if you're enjoying this, if you can still find joy in what you're doing, then it's worth doing it. If you're just going to beat yourself up over it and you don't enjoy this anymore, go ahead and think of something else you might want to do.
In that kind of your own journey, you found you were disappointed in the first art class.
Right.
Tried again, found something this time, and found joy, which eventually became enough of a passion that, okay, well, if I got to take drawing classes to get the...
Right. Yes, and I can draw now. I may not be great, but I can draw. Yes, ma'am.
Something very similar to that.
Uh-huh.
Artists like the piece should bring in you.
Right.
That will be seen by those who see the piece, whether they like it or not. They'll see it. You hear people talking about the love with which they cook a meal or something.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like that.
Yeah.
But that should be the satisfaction, but making it for you, but other people like it, that's a plus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know, I find there are people who are very talented artists who all their lives were told, you are a talented artist. Man, you're going to make it. And something happens and they don't make it for whatever reason. In their minds, they may be so successful, but they still don't see themselves as making it. I always hate seeing that, because I'm like, oh man, you've got the talent, you've got the ability, and you have produced incredible artwork, but they beat themselves up because they don't think they've reached or achieved this goal that was kind of set in front of them. And so I always feel sorry for people who get in that position, because it's a hard one to break out of. And I've never, I'm always saying, but you got it, man, you got it. You are so talented. And they're like, oh, but I didn't achieve this or that. And I'm like, well, you got to find it within yourself, right? You got to start there.
Susan, what you said earlier on too, there is somebody out there that will like what you've done. Because everybody is not the same.
Right.
I mean, if we were all the same, every house would be red, everyone would be wearing the same clothes, driving and it'd be a boring place, man.
Right.
You know? That's why we got diversity. I mean,
No, it's true.
I'll look at something else, cool, and the doctor will pass and say, I want to buy that. You know?
No, it's very
I
true.
don't know why a person would beat themselves up because some jackwagon said it's no good.
Yeah, I know, right? You have to.
Right?
Yeah, no, I agree, but I think it's getting past learning what other people say is so important. It shouldn't
There's different
steer your life.
there are too. If you're trying to make a living at it, you're going to have to connect with somebody who's going to be willing to pay for it. You know, so that's like a level of artistry where you have to, like an empathetic art, where you have to. It's important to understand the other person,
Right.
that they want to pull from it, compared with the artist that I think we're all taught to be. We've been first grade, we were not taught to be an artist to
Right.
sell to somebody. It was more of a means to serve our own like rest or processing or beauty for ourselves. You know, so it was more of an individual purpose for it. And I'd love for it connected to somehow emphasize both of those, but especially the you know, a lot of us grew out of art and music and dance. Now we grew out of it, and it'd be nice to grow back into it, not for the purpose of making a living at it, but for the purpose of living.
Right.
But you
Right.
probably find a lot of those dudes that are like it got a bit of a low self-esteem too. You know, they don't have that much confidence in themselves. But I mean, a person just tells me, I say, what? Sitting around, old fellow, I don't like to listen to your joke. I
Yeah.
don't worry me rolling off my back. I don't care.
Yeah.
Really, I don't.
I think
You snap him a little bit and send him on his way.
Right.
I think a lot of times when you get hard on yourself, I find that anything that you find very important, you always have this expectation inside. You know, there are many artists that say they get physically nauseated before they go out and perform or create, and I think that's just an acknowledgement inside just how this is very important.
So important. Yeah.
And so it's kind of, but then once you take that step or take that motion, then it finds its place and you shine. And to art, you know, you create for the passion that you have and what you're doing. And it's funny, the pieces that I dislike the most, they're good, but they're not my favorite.
Right.
Somebody will come along and go,
Yeah.
oh my God, I've been looking for that. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
You know,
Good.
so
Yeah,
it's-
right?
So you never know. So
You
have to
don't.
be
It is
true to
so true.
yourself and
Yeah.
just do what you
You
want.
can never say.
Yeah. No, it's very true. I agree. 100%. So I wish.
My question is for kind of both topics, but it seems like it fits. How do you eliminate the conflict of serving others before yourself? And it sounds like in art, you're saying just stay true to your heart and like, produce what you want. But I could see a lot of people say, well, I know specifically this person is not going to like it, so why would I waste my time on this instead I should make something for them? That traits, and then you don't rest. It seems like it all falls apart. So there's something with what you said about creating what you have inside, the creativity first, before the confidence to that, well, I don't care about this person's opinion.
Right.
It's probably the same with rest, where if you're confident, you're working well, then you're resting well, and not thinking, oh, wasting my time.
Well, it's definitely a journey, right? Because it's not anything you just wake up and one day go, oh, I'm a dancer, I'm an artist, I'm a singer, I'm whatever. It's going down that road and gaining your confidence with the failures and your successes, and I love being able to do stuff in the community. And to me, it's learning how to balance. It's learning how to notice what's important to yourself and what keeps you motivated and what keeps you rested and strong. Because if you're not in your best place, you're not going to be out here doing much for somebody else, right? So
Conflicted, fitting, stuff like that when you're working in the community.
no, I guess when I'm doing, like when I had the art center, and I loved every minute of that art center. But at that time, I did not do my artwork. That was just something that went on the shelf for a while. And so, but that was, for me at that time, it was okay. And like I said, I've kind of shifted to where, all right, I'd like to do a little bit for myself. I can still do stuff in the community, but it doesn't have to be tied to my art necessarily. I can choose to do other things in the community. I still love to teach. I do Eva's Heroes. I teach classes for adults with mental disabilities. And for them, it's all about the process. And that's something I didn't even touch on, but that is so important in the art in the art world and being creative with anything. It's the process that you do. It's not necessarily the end result. And like you said, not everyone's going to like what you end up with. But if you learn something from that process, if you enjoyed that process, and that's what at Eva's Heroes, man, they're so happy with what they have done. You like it or not, they don't care. But they just spent an hour doing it, and they had a great time, and they just can't believe that they did it. And so I'm always learning something from them. They're an amazing group of people. So there's a lot of ways to balance things out, right? You just kind of have to make it part of your journey. Keep on trying.